G'day, Ben from Duck Playing Chicken here with the next video in the 1/550th scale Aura Ship Zelerna by Bandai. I've primed everything in the previous video and I've done another round of sort of cleanup to try and make the seams look a little bit better. There's still some slight shadows there. You can see the seams, but I think it'll be good enough for me. We'll know once we get some colour on it. So the next step is to sort of talk about the colours that I want to use. One thing that sort of really caught my eye on the ship is the kind of, not only the unusual shape, but the sort of unusual colour scheme as well. So it has this sort of unusual green colour, which I couldn't find anything sort of straight out of, lacquer paint range that would match it. I looked at a couple of Mr. Colours and a few others, so I ended up having to mix my own. So this is what I've ended up with. It's not super accurate to the show, but it's going to work well enough for me, I think. So to talk about the paints that I used to mix this, I used about 55 to 60% of AN green by SMS. I used about 15% yellow by SMS, and then finally the rest of it, which is about sort of 30%, was white. And so that's how I sort of ended up with this particular colour. So that's sort of the green that's going to go with it. The other sort of key colour is the dark green that sort of goes with it, and for that I'm just using SMS green. So between these two colours there'll be a nice bit of contrast there. There are also flashes of red, so it's very sort of Christmas theme, green and red. And for the red bits I'm going to use Italian red. Now when you look at this in the bottle, it actually looks quite bright, but I know that by the time I put a matte coat over it, it actually does sort of darken up a little bit, so which will be kind of closer to what's in the show. So when we look at sort of the main body, of course most of this is going to be green. When we look at the engines, there are like the red, there's going to be red fins in here. Also this top part of the engine is going to be in the red. So on the bottom bit, again the fins will be red and the rest of it will be sort of green. There are of course accents of the dark green, so you can see that panel line there, the edge of the exhaust here, that'll be in the dark green, and also this top part of the front of the ship will be in the dark green as well. And then for the deck I'm going to use SMS tan, so that's sort of on the main floor part of it, and also these top areas where the decks are. Now I've sort of struggled to think about what to do with the windows. So there's a number of sort of windows on this craft, and in the anime they're either sort of shown as obviously transparent, or they're shown as sort of a like a white yellow, and I guess that's to indicate there's light coming from the inside of it. I think I'm going to go with what I know, which is I'm going to actually paint them black, give them a high gloss coat, and then mask them off and do the rest. So it'll just be sort of gloss black for the windows. And for that I am going to use SMS Jet Black. Now for the feet, the top sort of bit of it is green, but the bottom bit is sort of seen as white. So I'm not going to go with pure white, I'm actually going to go with SMS Neutral Grey for that. And I think next to the green this stuff will almost look like it's white anyway. The last sort of main colour is for the guns and also for the railings that go around on the decks, and for that I'm going to use dark sea blue. This is pretty dark. On the anime it's a little bit lighter blue, but I think this will probably just give it a little bit more realism just darkening it up a bit. So the railings, and there's a few other sort of accents, cannons and that sort of thing that I'll do in this colour. So that's sort of a look at the colours I'm going to use. Talk a little bit about the process I'm going to go through. First of all, I want to basically do all the detail bits first. So I'll be painting black for the windows, I'll be painting tan for the deck on this, and then I'll mask those off. And for those of you who got a keen eye, you'll notice I haven't got the whiskers or antennae on the top of it here yet. I'll be doing that once I'm ready to sort of spray the green. So I want to get all the other detail areas painted up first. For things like this exhaust here, I will paint the fins red first, then I'll mask that off. I'll then paint the dark green around the edge, mask that off, and then do the light green. So yeah, it's just a process of sort of working out which bits you want to paint first and then mask, and then the next bit of painting. So look, most of the pieces in this kit you actually don't need to mask. It's really sort of just the main body parts that require masking, so and the legs, but everything else is pretty straightforward. The first step is done, where I've sort of painted black in the areas where I've sort of designated black to go. I've put black on the inside here just because I don't want to sort of draw attention to it. There's sort of no detail or anything in there, so it's sort of easy to paint it black. I've done the windows in black and thrown a gloss over the top of them, so I think that's sort of what I'm going to do for all the window areas. So I think that's as good as it's going to get. I've also done, sort of spraying the red of the vents here, so I need to mask them up before obviously I paint sort of the rest of it. So just to sort of take you through the masking process, I've actually sort of shown this before. It is a little bit tricky to see on this one, but that front part of the dome, that's the bit I'm going to mask off. I'm going to take a little bit of Tamiya masking tape and just place it gently on the top, and then what I'll do is I'll burnish it down, starting on the top and working my way around. And what you want to do is find the edges, because that's what we're going to be cutting to. So you really want to burnish it down as much as you can, so you get a clear delineation of where the area you want to mask, where that starts and where it ends. And because this is a lacquer paint, I can actually burnish this stuff down pretty hard, and I know it's not going to affect the paint job in any way. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll take a scalpel, and the reason I'm using a scalpel is just because it's super sharp, and I will gently work around the edge of the area I want to mask off. And I'll take the tweezers and gently start pulling at it, just to make sure that I've cut into those corners properly. It's not starting to lift. And I'll give it another bit of a burnish. The toothpick's falling apart here. And what you'll end up with is your masked off area like that. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do the rest of the windows and mask them off, and then I can work on the next bit of painting. So another trick I use for masking is where I use a file or a sanding stick to basically create a nice clean edge. So I painted on the inside here jet black, and I wanted to mask this area off before I sort of continue painting with other areas. So you can sort of see the side that I've done where it's a nice sort of clean edge, whereas the other side I've just got like tape hanging over the edge. Now this can be really tricky to sort of, you know, cut with a knife. Might be a bit awkward to do. So I use a combination. You can use a sanding stick. So this I think is about a 300 grit or something. But I actually find that a file that's relatively fine works a little bit better. And so what I'll do is I'll run it sort of at a 45-degree angle across the edge. And what you'll start to see is you'll start to see this sort of the plastic model kit sort of be exposed underneath. So you don't want to be too sort of aggressive with it. Like, don't use a very coarse file because it will damage your kit. What you're sort of doing is just filing away the tape from the edge. And you can see that it's starting to sort of pull away there, so I know I don't need to sort of, you know, file that particular part anymore. But the other thing about, especially like a flat edge file, is you can get right in the corner and you can get a really nice sort of clean edge. So I'll get some tweezers. There's just a little bit of cleanup I need to do just to neaten it up a bit. There, you can see that gives you a really nice clean edge. And the other thing is you want to sort of go, you don't want to be sanding in the direction where it could lift the tape. So for example, this bit here, I don't want to be sort of sanding in an upward direction. I want to sort of sand, you know, down, follow the path of the tape. Now this is quite a fine file, so it's taking a little bit to get through the masking tape, but I'm just going to give it a bit of a clean up. Just get rid of those sort of fluffy edges, because there will be some. And there you have a nice clean sort of masked edge. I don't need to worry about the bottom bits, of course, but certainly around these sides I need to worry about. Now the other thing where that's really good is for curved areas. So I've painted the tan for the decks, and what I'll do is I'll run the masking tape, and part of that process will be, you know, using this file technique, but I'll also use a knife to sort of finish it off at the end. There'll be some areas where I can't get the file in, so you know, sort of it's going to be pretty tight, some of those areas, so I may have to revert to using a knife for some of that. But at least you get, you know, a bit of an idea. It's just a different way of sort of masking, especially some of those troublesome areas. So I've continued with the painting. You can see the dark green that I put down here. The next thing I'll do is mask that off, and then the final bit will be sort of the light green that goes over it. However, I don't know if I want to do that just yet. I think I'm trying to work out the best way to attach the antennae so that they don't sort of break off later, so I haven't quite worked that out. But anyway, I still need to mask off the dark green and then do the light green over the top. Also for one of the engines, I've done the lighter green. I will mask that off and then paint this top bit red. So you can see I've sort of masked this area off, which is dark green. Now some of these other pieces I can actually unmask. So these are the little gun turrets that go on the sides, and the top of them are tan, and then the bottom of them are red. So you can sort of see that looks like it came up pretty good. Now the cranes are actually made up of 3 colours. So there's the, you know, taking the masking off, it's like the painting order in reverse. So I did the green last, the light green here. And the very first colour I did was the dark sea grey for the end of the crane. So Yeah, pretty happy with the mask on that. That came up pretty good. Now the ones that I'm worried about the most are the feet, and the reason for that is because we've sort of got this moving bit in here, and if I rotate it you can see there's a bit that I've missed, so I need to sort of go in and just give this another coat. But I am kind of worried about the extent of the masking on this and how well it went, just because the actual feet themselves are white, so it's a little bit more obvious when something goes wrong. But anyway, for these ones I've got to sort of bend them over and just give them another coat just to get those end bits there. I think I messed up, but it's not a big drama. I'm not happy with the light green that I've mixed up, and you can sort of see it here. It's a little bit dark, and I don't mind the dark so much, but it's more the hue of it. What I'm going for is something closer to what's in the illustration here, and I just feel I'm a long way off there. So what I've done is I have mixed up a different colour. This colour is made up of 2 different types of paints. Given that this was a $12 kit, now is the time to do experimentation. So if it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. I haven't ruined an amazing kit, that I've been, it's been sitting in my stash for a very long time. So this is made up of both SMS and Mr. Colour paints. The Mr. Colour I used about 40% of Mr. Colour 64, which I believe is light green if I remember rightly. I used the last one of this, so I don't have the bottle anymore. So 40% of that, and then I used 60% of SMS white. Now, given that they're both lacquer based paints, I don't think there'll be any problem with them. But this is sort of an experiment because I've been meaning to sort of look at other ways of sort of mixing paints. Sometimes in the Mr. Colour range, there'll be sort of some colours that I like a lot more that aren't available in the SMS range. So I want to see if I can sort of mix things up a little bit. I'm not expecting too many problems, but you never know. This whole kit can be ruined because of this one decision. And regardless of how it goes, I will show it on video, so you will see the results regardless of whether it was a disaster or not. So holding it up next to the painted version of the previous colour I had, you can see it's a lot lighter. I suspect it will dry a little bit darker than what you're sort of seeing in the bottle. Anyway, I need to go away and do all light green stuff. Thankfully, there's only a little bit of remasking I have to do, nothing serious, so it looks like I might have dodged a bit of a bullet there. Time for the moment of truth when I do some unmasking. So let's start with the main body here and see how we go. So this bit here is all black so that it sort of doesn't draw attention to itself, because there's no actual sort of detail in the model kit, the inside of this section. Now for the windows here, I'm going to leave them masked because they've got a gloss coat on them, and because eventually I will be doing a matte coat on this. So we have the tan deck in place, and then we've got the tan deck over the front part of the craft. Well, the masking was, I would say, successful, I think. I've got a little bit of overspray in some places, but not too bad. I can sort of live with that. Let's look at some of the other pieces. So this is the main sort of floor part. So this is a combination of the dark green, the light green, and the tan. Now there is a bit of a miss here, but that's not a problem because that's covered by one of the other pieces. Yep, alright, that'll do. I think I'm pretty happy with that. Again, there's this window part which I'm going to keep masked for now. Let's have a look at the underside. So this was basically the light and dark green, but there is also some red on the exhaust fins. So we'll see how that all panned out. This part also has a window piece here that I'm going to leave masked, and also at the back here. Let's have a look at one of these engines. Now so far I haven't come across any adverse effects from mixing SMS paints with the Mr. Colour. So I think that's an issue. I just love how lacquer paints are so durable. I know if I was still using water-based acrylics, there's no way they would take that sort of punishment. Okay, so we've got the exhaust with red fins, we've got the red, and there's a dark green piece that goes over here to cover that up. So it's come up not too bad, I don't think. Now the one I'm probably worried about the most is these feet, because I expect these ones may have some issues and may need some retouching. Fingers crossed they don't, but we shall see. Yeah, there's a little bit of green sort of coming up on white, but it's actually not too bad. And you got to remember they are going to be folded up sort of like that, so I think there might be some minimal touch up there. So I'm pretty happy with those. I went ahead and gloss coated everything and then realised that I haven't actually masked off these little circular bits which are supposed to be green, so I'll just quickly show you how I'm going about that. Now what I use is this Display Circle Cutter, you can see MTEC, and this thing is brilliant. It's got its problems, I think I've spoken about it before. It does have some issues as far as the setup goes, but once you've got it dialed in, it is brilliant. So these are 3mm diameter circles here. So I've got the radii set to radius set to 1.5mm, and you literally just put it onto the tape there, and then go around. And I'm going to do it again because I've got two circles that I've got to mask off, and it's not going to be that obvious just yet, but when I cut this tape out and lift it off, you will see how clean the circles are on it. Look at that. That is a beautiful bit of circle masking. Let me get that lined up. Now it looks like circles are a bit over, maybe just a fraction over 3mm, but it doesn't matter as long as I get a green circle. So you can see how that's come up there, which is pretty good. I'm pretty happy with that. And I'll do the other side. So although this circle cutter is not particularly cheap, I'm going to say it is great for situations like this where you've got very small circles that you have to mask, and it is perfect for that. I know you can get sheets of pre-cut, circles masking, but I prefer to have the flexibility of being able to make the circles, the exact size that I need. Now I'll go ahead and mask up the rest of it because I am not that well controlled with an airbrush. I tend to use an airbrush like a spray gun. So I know some people, you know, they can mask off that area there and they'll get in with a airbrush and not get any overspray. That's not the way I do it. I'm not that good. Okay, so there we have one of the feet masked up, a little circle. So I've actually done all the others beforehand, and they are ready for painting. Okay, I've given these feet a bit of time to dry, so now it's time to check how successful the masking was. Okay, so that masking came up pretty well, I think. Don't have a problem with that at all. So it's pretty close to the way it's supposed to look. The other thing that I need to do is the panel lining, and so for that I am going to be using Tamiya's panel line accent colour. I'm going to use black. Now there will be some oil, some weathering I'm going to do with oils, maybe a little bit with pastels, I haven't decided yet, but basically I want to do the panel lines in black and then give it a matte coat over the top before I start the weathering. Give this stuff a good shake. And I've shown this process a number of times before, but essentially you take the brush and just apply it to a corner, and through capillary action you can see that it just goes through the travels along the lines. Now I try to keep it as clean as possible, just because I want to reduce the amount of cleanup that I have to do. But that's not to say, you know, some people find it easier just to coat the whole lot and then clean it back. Now I've got a gloss coat on it, and the panel lines in this kit are pretty deep, so I'm finding that the enamel paint is travelling along the panel lines quite nicely. And so the less mess that I create, the less I have to clean up later on down the track. Now I'm actually going to leave that there because I want to show something else I need to do at this stage. Now you can sort of see a bit of picture of it, yeah. So you can see there's these sort of orange lights on the neck, and of course I haven't lit those, so what I need to do is use some enamel paint in there. There's also, I've got, yeah, I think they're the only ones, so it's only the ones on the neck that I haven't actually lit, but I am going to have to give some sort of indication there of, you know, that it's supposed to be orange. So I'm going to get out my palette, and I'll be using, I don't actually have any sort of orange enamel paint, so I'll be using a combination of flat red and flat yellow enamel paint. So now I'm just going to take a brush and give these a bit of a mix. Try to come up with a nice sort of orange colour. I want something that's reasonably, probably more on the yellow side than the red side. So I think I only need a little bit of red. But I reckon that's pretty good. And of course I've mixed way too much. Literally only need it for 6 little specks. That's alright. Now, I haven't thinned this down at all, so it's just sort of straight enamel paint. But what I want to do is sort of get it in the in these little recesses here, and I will end up cleaning it up the same way you do with panel lines, which is basically just take a bit of enamel thinner on a cotton bud and run it over the top. So I've left the panel liner to dry for many hours, and now it's time for cleanup. So for cleanup I use Shellite, but you can also use Zippo fluid or enamel thinner. They'll still work the same way, as long as it's an enamel based product that you know, you're using to clean up the panel liner. So I just decant a bit into a small jar. And then I take a cotton bud, get some on the cotton bud, just wipe off the excess on a paper towel, and then what we do is we just brush over very lightly, and you're always doing it across the panel line because you don't want to remove any of the enamel paint that's in the panel line. You just want to remove the stuff that's sitting outside of it. So there you can see it's just giving it a bit of a clean up. Certainly not a new process. Most modelers sort of use this sort of process, and if you haven't used it before, I'd certainly recommend it. Just really helps to bring out all those sort of details that you have with your panel lines in a model kit. And thankfully this kit has some reasonable panel lines in it. It certainly has some deep panel lines, which is good because that means it holds the enamel paint really well. The other thing I'll do is I'll do a pass over everything, and then I will come back at a later date and give it a good look over again, because I inevitably miss stuff on the first time, so it's always good to sort of go back and give it another shot. Okay, before I sort of start putting everything together, I need to affix this post where the wires are going to go through into the base. I'm going to fix this to the bottom part of the craft. So this is a 3mm aluminium tube, and as you can see I've just sort of drilled a hole and poked it up through there, but what I need to do is use some epoxy putty to make sure it doesn't go anywhere. So I've got it sort of coming up a little bit, and that way I can get sort of a bit of putty around. The stuff I'm going to use is this premium magic putty by Infini. I find this stuff really good. But before I mix up the putty, what I want to do is I want to block up the hole here so I don't accidentally putty that in place. So I've just stuck a toothpick in there. Now this putty, it's just 2 equal parts. Of course you need to mix it really well. I've got a toothpick and another toothpick standing by that I can use to sort of pack it in place. So we can see daylight out the end of the tube, which is good. So now I will leave that to dry. This stuff takes about 12 hours to cure properly, so I will be leaving it and for a good 12 hours at least. Now for the base, I'm using one of these clear acrylic, they're called gift boxes, and they're sort of 5cm cubed. They're a good size. They've got this lid which I actually sort of position on the bottom. Gives me room to get to the electronics. It's also got a pour mark in the middle, which means that if I don't want the post in the middle, then I have to sort of fill that and drill a hole elsewhere. But anyway, I'm going to take you through the different stages. So this is the first stage. The next stage is drilling holes. So I use a step drill for this process. I find that's a little bit safer to do it rather than one big drill bit at one time. So a step drill just goes up incrementally. It's like a stepped cone, looks like. Now these holes are drilled for, I've got like a toggle switch which fits into one, and then I've got a USB-C power pre-wired socket here, so that goes into the other hole. There's also a 3mm hole in the top which the aluminium tube sort of attaches to. And then finally everything gets a coat of black SMS black primer and a matte coat over the top of it. And so that's sort of how it's going to look now. Of course I haven't installed the switch and socket yet. I'll do all that once I've sort of got the rest of the craft sorted out. Now that everything's had a matte coat over the top of it, I have started assembly, basically just by putting the main bulk of the body onto the floor and feeding out the wires here. Now the next step is going to be a little bit tricky because the engine parts that go on the sides here, they obviously have the wires coming out for the lighting, and I didn't want to put the wires into the main body because then they have to feed through the floor and it was going to be a bit tricky. So what they're going to do is they're actually going to be a little bit crimped, and I don't know if you can see that, but they're sort of poking out the sides there, and then it'll literally just be across to, you know, the base of the craft that goes over the top of the wires. So I've got to glue those in place. Now you do need to be aware they do go around a particular way because these bits go over the top, sort of like that. So you need to make sure you get them sort of, you know, in the right direction. So I'm just going to use some styrene cement to glue these in place and make sure the wires are sort of heading in the right direction. Now it will mean that underneath, if anyone actually sort of turns it upside down and has a very close look, they will be able to see a couple of wires, but it's going to be so minimal, it's not going to bother me at all. So I'm just using some Revell contactor to glue these in place. And I think what I'll do want to be careful with this stuff because you don't want it to sort of ooze out the side. So I'm usually quite, what I'll do is I'll get a bit on the piece I want to glue, and then I'll use like a toothpick or something just to spread it out a little bit so it doesn't ooze out the sides. I'll probably put way too much there. And I'm just holding that in place until it sets up. And the fact that, you know, there's a little bit of an error there with the painting, and you can see where the clip held it, that doesn't matter because this piece covers all that up. So it covers a multitude of sins. The other thing you'll notice I haven't done is put the end cap on, but I really want to get the bulk of the main structure sort of together before I worry about all the details. Of course, there's all the fins and the, you know, converters or whatever they're called hanging off it as well. So need to get all the bulk of the main craft together first. And that way I can sort of sort out to the wiring. I need to hook up some resistors yet and I haven't done that, so I really want to do that all at this level and then have that all go through the main post as just two wires. So still a little bit of work to do there. Alright, so I've got that one sorted out. I'll move on to the next one. Okay, just checking on the back to make sure they're sort of looking even. There's nothing out of the ordinary. I think that's it. Alright, so I will leave them to dry before I move any further, I think. It has been a long time since a kit has frustrated me this much. I am just really struggling to get the bottom bit stuck on this ship. The problem is that it's almost like it's warped. Actually, it's warped the other way. It's warped like that. So when I sort of stick the back part together and I get that, you know, successfully glued, and then I work on the front, gluing the front, the back pops out, you know, and I've used, you know, I've tried super glue. I'm sort of working with styrene cement at the moment. I tried styrene cement at the beginning and yeah, it just didn't come back. I've tried scraping away paint because I thought that would be the issue. So I've put a lot more glue in this time than I normally would on a plastic kit. And yeah, I think the issue is because, yeah, it's sort of, something's bowed somewhere, and I'm really sort of struggling with it. You know, I thought it was maybe the wires, you know, caught up in there or something like that. But anyway, this is my last go of it, and I am not one to throw away a kit. I will persist with the model kit until it's finished, even if I'm not entirely happy with it. And I suspect that this might be in that group. it's sort of just, yeah, kind of driving me a bit nuts at the moment. But anyway, what you can see is I've got 3 wires coming out the bottom of the post. I didn't film all that because it was all sort of tight and fiddly, but essentially all the wires from the LEDs in the craft go to, there's 2 lives. There's one for the window LEDs, and then there's one for the engine LEDs. And the reason for that is because I need to hook up two different resistors to those LEDs, and then there's a common ground. So the resistors I'll do sort of all in the base, and there was no way I was going to fit them in that top area. So I'm waiting for this to dry, and hopefully it stays. I have knocked off these ears a number of times now, so I mean I really had to put them on in order to get it all painted the same colour, but I feel like this model is now fighting me good and proper. As you can see, I have added a lot of the detail parts to the kit, and yeah, this thing has just fought me all the way. Now, this is not a reflection of the kit. This is purely modeler error. This is my stuff ups and that sort of thing, because the kit actually goes together quite well. There's a couple of bits that could have been maybe engineered a bit better, but yeah, I've just had all sorts of dramas. So putting on these railings is incredibly fiddly, and you can sort of see just there's sort of a drip where I had the glue in, and of course it sort of, I mean, I'll be able to cover it with a bit of weathering, but it doesn't look flash. And there's also some sort of marks on the on these wing things as well. It's just, and also up in here is a mess. Sort of see that mess made there. Now some of it I'll be able to cover with weathering, others I won't. Now the other thing is, if you look at underneath, the feet, legs, they were incredibly tricky to put in, and those round dome bits, they're not actually glued in, they're kind of just friction fit, because yeah, if I glued them in I couldn't get the legs in properly, so I think that was just because I had a bit too much paint on it. You'll also notice I've still got masking on the window areas, and I am well aware of that. I will be taking that off towards the end. Yeah, so I'm going to sort of start putting on some of these other pieces, and for that I'm actually using thicker contactor glue to do that. So looking at the instructions, they actually recommend that you do these ones first, which of course are the most fragile ones, so this is going to be it's going to be interesting. Let's see how they sort of I don't want it sort of resting on the engine here, so I want it sort of propped up a little bit. Alright, then we have these guys. Okay, so that's the converter, and then we have the red pipes. Sort of go down the which way do they face? I want to make sure I get them the right way. They all seem to be sort of facing backwards. Okay, I think that's right. So I think I might leave that to dry a little bit, and then I can sort of start looking at getting the other side on. Now I sort of know what I'm kind of doing. The other thing is, another mess up that I did was these, the feet. You'll sort of notice if I put it up against the wing, it's a different green. And that's because when I changed the greens that I was using, I forgot that I'd had this masked. So I actually don't mind it. I don't mind having, introducing another green in it. I know it's not canon, but I think given that this kit is fighting me so much at the moment, I kind of want to get it together and then weathered. So yeah, I want to just notice the handrails come off again. It seems to be doing that quite a bit. Yeah, so I want to sort of get it together so I can get the weathering done. I really want to put this one to bed. So this thing has continued to battle with me. The front windscreen, when I unmasked it, there was a little bit of a mark there. I suspect that's come about when I clamped it down, so not quite sure what I'm going to do about that. The rest of the windows looked okay. Sort of one underneath, also on the back there, a bit hard to see. Putting all the I don't know, extra tubes and wings and all that sort of stuff on it, it took a little bit of time to get them all lined up properly. They're still not lined up perfectly, but it's not too bad. So the next step is, of course, to start the weathering, but before I cover that, I want to show you what I've done with the figures. Now, the kit actually comes with 4 figures, but I've only painted 2 of them, and that's because they're the 2 main ones that belong on the craft. So I've got this one here. Now, all I've done is I've done the base coat. I haven't done any sort of panel lining or anything like that. And here's the other one, and then I'll talk about the colours that I used. And I've tried to keep it pretty close to what's actually in the anime itself, as opposed to what's in the instructions, because they seem to vary a little bit. So, talk about the colours that I used. They're all the Vallejo Mecha colour range. So I used red, I used orange, dark blue, Titan dark blue, purple, and finally olive green. So combination of all of those to create the 2 figures. So the next step is for me to let these things dry really well, and then I'll give them a panel line wash and stick them on the ship. I'll probably stick them on after I've done the weathering of the ship, I think. So that's the plan anyway. Okay, time to start doing some weathering on this kit, and I want to keep it pretty subtle. Given the scale of this thing, it doesn't make sense that you would see, you know, a lot of chipping or even a lot of sort of really obvious streaking. So what I'm going for is what I've done on the other side, which might be a little bit tricky to see on camera, but you can see there's sort of some subtle streaking there. You can also see a bit of yellow in there, because I wanted to sort of give it a bit more of a yellowy green sort of look. A little bit of white in there, but it's yeah, not sort of obvious streaking. It's just enough to sort of break up the green so that it's not sort of all just one sort of straight colour. So I'll take you through how I did that process. Now I'm using these 502 Abtai Lung weathering oils. So I use a combination of Snow White, what's this one, Light Mud, focus, Light Mud, a little bit of Earth, and then finally for the yellow I'm actually using just Tamiya XF3 Enamel Flat Yellow. So between these 4 colours, that's sort of how I'm doing the weathering. The first one I start with is the white, and so I will take a toothpick and get a bit of this on, a bit of the paint on the toothpick, and then I will start sort of just dabbing it in random spots, just little dots of it, doesn't need to be too much. Just sort of getting it lots of different random spots. And so this white will knock back the green a little bit, make it look a bit more as if it's been in the weather, a bit more, you know, exposed to the elements. Okay, the next step is to take an old sort of flat brush, and I've got some, I'm using shellac, but you can use some enamel thinner, it'll do the same thing. So I'll just dab a bit on my brush, wipe the excess off on the paper towel, and then I'll just start essentially taking the white back. So you sort of don't want sort of massive lumps of white like that. You want to use enough of the thinner to sort of knock it right back so it's a lot more subtle. And wherever possible you want to be going in the direction that you would expect this stuff to flow. So of course it'll flow downhill. A little bit on the railings as well, but that's alright. And so it's just repeating the process. Essentially I'm just trying to take it back to a bare minimum so it's nice and subtle. Now at this scale you're not even really going for sort of obvious streaks and sort of more, you know, areas of staining. Now of course this is not a new technique, this is a technique that has been done by modelers for a very long time, certainly in the armour modelling space. But the good thing is a lot of these sort of great modelling techniques are finding their way into, you know, sci-fi builds, Gundam builds, that sort of thing. If you're new to weathering, I'd certainly recommend giving this a shot. You don't have to buy super expensive oil paint, but the better the brand, the better you'll find it'll work. You don't really want to go sort of super cheap with the oils that you pick. They can be artist oils, they don't have to be, you know, specifically for model making. And it will, you know, it's such a sort of fun step to do, and it's relatively easy. You got plenty of time to work with it, you got lots of control. So it's a really good sort of weathering technique if you're sort of new to weathering your kits. And of course I've been guilty in the past of going too heavy with this stuff, so I'm sort of very conscious of that now when I'm building, you know, certainly when I'm working with different scales. You do want to be, you know, you want the weathering to be the right scale for the kit. Now because I'm using quite a bit of thinner, you do want to be careful that it doesn't, you know, pull underneath. So you need to sort of go in there and clean that up. Okay, so I'm going to just finish up all the white and then move on to the next colour. Okay, so the white's done, and I've tried to get rid of any sort of obvious brush marks. Actually, seeing it under the camera, I can actually see some, so just sort of take those back a little bit and then start with the next colour. So for the next colour I'm going to use the light mud, and essentially I'm going to do the same process, but this time I'm probably going to do less dots. The other thing I'm going to use this for is for texturing up a little bit the deck, because the deck is sort of the one colour, and it's maybe going to be a bit hard to see, but you can see I've dirtied up that front deck just a little bit, just to break it up so it's not sort of all super one colour. So I'm going to put a few sort of specks on the deck, and then a couple around the craft. And I don't want to do too many of these, but same thing, I'm just taking my brush, dunking in the thinner and brushing down. Okay, just to show you the technique I use on the deck, I literally just use sort of a stippling approach. I tend to find that, you know, this works pretty well. And again, really it's just about sort of breaking up that deck colour so that it's not super flat. Alright, onto the next colour. Now this stuff it almost looks like rust when you put it on, so I tend to use this one a bit more sparingly again. So you can sort of tell I'm going from most to least, and literally same process. Toothpick, bit of the oil on the toothpick, and then go around, very select a few parts. Now this, what I'll do is I'll actually target specific areas where I would expect, you know, maybe a little bit of rust to appear. Alright, I'll finish that off and then we'll go to the last colour. So the final step is the yellow, and literally the same process again. Alright. So we're sort of doing here, it's almost like what they call a filter, where we're sort of changing the colour. So we're making the green a little bit, giving it a bit more of a yellow hue in places. And it's coming out a lot more vibrant on camera than it is in real life, but at least you can sort of see what's happening, I guess. And just quickly I'll show you the figures because I've finished those. They're not sort of hyper detailed, but I've given them a bit of a wash to bring out some of the detail. So I think I'll just stick them on probably with a bit of super glue. I'll have them at basically the doorways, the large entrance ways and the craft, so they're sort of hiding the fact that there's no detail. So I'll probably have one on, one on this side and one on the other. Okay, so moving on to wiring. Okay, so the wiring is all done. I did all the soldering off camera, but I can explain what I've done here. So there's a negative coming from the USB port and a negative from the LEDs, so they get joined together. There is the positive from the USB socket going to a toggle switch, and off the other pin of the switch is the leads that go to the positive leads that go to the LEDs. And I've used some header blocks just to temporarily put in some resistors. The reason I'm doing that is because I don't have the data sheets on some of the LEDs that I've used, so I'm not sure what the maximum amount of milliamps are that can go through them without sort of burning them out. So I was just playing it a bit safe and sort of underdoing it, but I've swapped out a couple of different resistors just to check, and I think I've got it right. So now it's just a matter of sort of getting it all in the base. So just squeeze everything into that hole and get the socket into place, the switch, and then I'm done. I've just got to stick on the figures. That's one more thing, and then it's time for the glamour shots. But it's probably a good point here to sort of talk about, my findings with the kit. So the kit itself is, reasonably well engineered for a kit of its time. It goes together quite well. It seems to be reasonably screen accurate as well, which is great. I had a lot of problems with it, and a lot of that falls back to me. And so I had a lot of issues sort of sticking the details on and what have you. There are some pretty messy areas of this kit where, I haven't been able to trim the fibre optics properly. there was a couple of mistakes with, some scratches and stuff here and there that weren't supposed to be there. So this one will be going to the back of the shelf. I won't be throwing it out. I don't throw out my models, but it will be going to the back of the shelf with the naughty kits. So yeah, I'm not, after coming off my last build with the Macross Factory, which I really loved, and I'm quite proud of that one. This one I ain't proud of, but I think it's good for my audience to sort of see that, yep, not everything I do I'm happy with. So, okay, on with glamour shots, or the not so glamorous shots. And until next build series, I will catch you later.